Well, it is my special honor to introduce our guest speaker tonight, or this afternoon. And I have to say, it also happens to be one of my personal heroes. So the woman I'll be introducing you to here in just a moment is the Women's Athletic Director for over 29 years at UT Knoxville, otherwise known as the Lady Vols, Joan Cronan. Now, for those of you who may not know much about Joan, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about her before she comes to the stage. In 29 plus years at UT, she built a tradition of winning. One of the most successful female athletic programs in the country in more than just one sport. In softball, in basketball, soccer, and all of the different sports that they offer. She brought a level of excellence, and more importantly, maintained that level of excellence. For those of you that know anything about basketball, Pat Summitt called her boss. How about that? One of the things that she's just phenomenal at doing is managing high performers. And Pat Summitt, as all of you know, in women's basketball is one of the most successful coach in all the history of women's basketball in the United States. That's right. Yeah, for Pat Summitt. I will tell you, in 2005, Joan was recognized as the top athletic director in the entire U.S. by the NCAA. And she also worked not only on the national scale to elevate women's athletics, but also locally and regionally. What you may not know is, in addition to being a Vol, she spent 10 years as an athletic director here in the College of Charleston in our great state of South Carolina. She was also recognized for that decade of service, and the program was recognized as the #1 women's athletic program in the country by American Women's Sports Foundation. And you can find Joan Cronan in the Hall of Fame of the Cougars. Now, let me be clear. I did not call Joan a Cougar. She is merely in the Cougar Hall of Fame. I have to say, I was fortunate enough to hear Joan recently speak. She was at the United Way Worldwide Women's Leadership Council meeting earlier this year in Charleston. And I can tell you from personal experience that you are in for a treat. One of the things she taught us was how to ring the bells, an acronym she uses so that you as a woman every day can make a difference in your work, in your family, and all that you put your mind to. So what I'd like to do is introduce you to a phenomenal mother, grandmother, tennis player, golfer, athletic director, coach, mentor, leader, motivator, philanthropist, and I have to say a volunteer with a capital V. Would you please welcome Joan Cronan as our guest speaker.
Thank you, thank you. I kind of like the Cougar part myself. It is great to be here, and I just want to applaud each of you in this room. I get to speak to a lot of women's groups across the country, but what you have done over the last 15 years is just absolutely phenomenal. Give yourself a hand. You know, I heard recently that when we get to heaven, God is going to meet us there, and He is going to ask us, where are our scars? And if you say, I don't have any, He's going to ask us, wasn't there anything worth fighting for? I can tell you, United Way is worth fighting for. It is one of the best organizations I've ever had the opportunity to work with. In 1991, I was sitting at my desk and being an athletic director and thought life was really good. And some prominent gentleman came in my office and said, would you chair the United Way Drive? And my first thought, like many of you, oh, I'm too busy, I can't do that. And they kept saying, this will be the best thing you have ever done. So I agreed, and it was the best thing I have ever done in the community. But I have to admit, what these gentlemen didn't understand, and we ladies understand more than they do, was when I was chairing The United Way, it was like being pregnant. And when you get to the end, it's like being in labor. But after it's all over, you forget all that pain, right? So I can say that I thought it was one of the best events I'd ever had an opportunity. This event is about women leaders making a difference. It's about women with influence and affluence making a difference in other women's life. I love what you've done here. This is really special. And excuse the language a little bit, but you know, there is a special place in hell for women who don't help women. Don't you agree? I really agree. And you know, there's certain things that men will never understand about women. They will never understand when we look at colors, there's beige and tan and off-white. They just don't get it. They will never understand when we go to buy a pair of shoes, if we find one we like, we get it in every color. They will never understand when we're blowing our hair dry, that there is a critical moment that you don't talk to me. I cannot stop right now. While I'm speaking about heaven and hell, I've got to tell you that God promised men that good and obedient wives would be found in all the corners of the world. Then he made the earth round and laughed and laughed and laughed. You know, certain things stress women out and others don't. Probably one of the biggest stressors for women is when we go to get our physical. You know, none of us like to do that, but we all know we do. It reminds me of a lady who went in to have her physical, and of course the nurse wanted to get all of her vital statistics, so she's got the little chart, and she asked the lady, she says, "How tall are you?" And she said, "Oh, I'm 5'7". So the nurse measures her. Well, she's 5'5". Well, then the nurse says, "How much do you weigh?" And she says, "Oh, 125. And she steps on the scales, and she's 145. Well, then the nurse says, "You know, we've got to take your blood pressure." The lady says, "Okay." So she takes her blood pressure, and she looks at her, and she says, "It is sky high." Well, the lady looks at the nurse with a very stern look and says, "Wouldn't your blood pressure be high if you came in here tall and skinny and are leaving short and fat?" The reason I got into the world of athletics was I was 12. And you know Barbara Mandrell's song that she was country before it was cool to be country? Well, I was a tomboy before it was cool for women to be in sports. And I will never forget the day that I tried out for Little League Baseball. I put on my hat and took the bat and glove and went down there and was ready to try out. Well, this gentleman wouldn't let me play. He offered to let me be a scorekeeper. He offered to let me be a manager. He even got desperate and offered to let me be an assistant coach. But he wouldn't let me play. And I was determined at that time, at 12, that I wanted to be in a business that helped women learn to compete. And I am so proud in today's world that there's so many women, your daughters, your nieces, all have that opportunity to compete at the highest level. Title IX was working. I get asked, "Is Title IX working?" And I say, "Heck yeah." I get on an airplane and a gentleman sits next to me, and I introduce myself and I say, "I'm Joan Cronan, I'm Women's Athletic Emeritus at the University of Tennessee." They usually smile. The first question they ask me, "Does she stare at you the way she stares at everybody else?" And of course they're talking about Pat Summitt's stare. But what does that mean? It means people know about our program. And then the second question they ask me, which is really important about Title IX, they say, "I have a daughter," or "I have a granddaughter who," and they go on to describe the athletic ability of their daughters and granddaughters. Title IX is working. women are making a difference if moms and dads and grandmoms and granddads want the same opportunities for their daughters as they want for their sons. My goal in life has been to make a difference in young people's lives. And if you know anything about the Lady Vols, and Trish was very nice, we've won 8 national championships, we've done lots of wonderful things. But the thing that I am most proud of is our graduation rate. If you take women's basketball at the University of Tennessee, Pat Summitt coached for 36 years. Every young lady she ever coached who played 4 years graduated. That's the record that I'm proud of in making a difference. That just doesn't happen. Just like banquets like this and making a difference in women's lives in Greenville, Tennessee, don't just happen. You have to have goals. You have to have people that believe in what you're doing. And I'm going to tell you a basketball story about a basketball player who I think exemplifies kind of what we do in United Way, is helping people be better. Pat was recruiting a young lady, and she was from Kentucky. She was from the coal mining part of Kentucky, a very poor part of Kentucky. In our world, you can go up and visit, and you can bring them in to visit you on campus. And she went up to visit this young lady, and she called me on the way back, and she said, "Joan, I just don't know if this is going to work." She comes from a very poor economic situation. She comes from a very poor education system. I just don't know if she's ready. Well, the AD and me said, "How good is she?" She said, "She's really good, and she really wants to come." So I said, let's bring her in and see how she responds and what she does in our program, while she visits with us over the weekend. So we brought her in, and I'll never forget that Saturday. I went down to meet her, along with 107 other thousand people. It was a football Saturday. They were all dressed in orange. And I'll never forget walking up to meet this young lady. Outside of my office was a tall, attractive, blonde young lady dressed in this gorgeous suit. And my mind was going crazy because I was picturing the poverty that Pat had described. And finally I said, "You know, that's one of the prettiest suits I've ever seen." And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, "You know, Miss Cronan, when Pat came to visit, my mother drew a picture of the suit that Pat had on, and my mother made this suit to come visit." Well, ladies, I'm soft-hearted. That kid was signed. She was ready. She was set. Well, she came, and she was never the star, but she was kind of the worker. She made things happen, and she did well academically her freshman and sophomore year. Her junior year, right in the middle of SEC play in February, our academic advisor came in and said, "Joan, she's struggling. It's not that she's not trying. It's just that she can't catch up. It's like she's on that treadmill and can't catch up." Well, I called a summit conference. I called Pat, and I called this young lady, and I called our academic advisor. And I talked about what our goals were, just like your goals are, to make a difference. And our goals were that she come to Tennessee and play basketball, but she graduate. So what we decided to do was pull her out of practice and off the road for 3 weeks to give her time to catch up. But to show her we weren't punishing her, we did that kind of tough love that you do as a parent. We let her start at all the home games. So 2 weeks went by, and our academic advisor came back and gave me thumbs up and said, "She's doing great." So we let her start traveling, and we let her start playing again and practicing. We went to the SEC tournament that year, and we lost in the finals, but she made the All-SEC tournament. And I was so glad we hadn't denied her that opportunity to be the best that she could be. Well, we go on to the Final Four that year. And, you know, we're getting ready, and everybody's trying to get everything done. And I run back to my room, and the phone rings, and it's this young lady. And she's crying, and it startled me, and I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "I wanted you to be the first one to know that UT just called, and I made the dean's list." So she made the dean's list. She went on to help us win a national championship that year, but more important, she became the first member of her family ever to graduate from college. That's what's making a difference in women's lives. And that's what you are doing here at this banquet. You are making a difference. I'm a tennis nut. I love to play tennis. And think about this. It is better to serve than receive. It is better to serve than receive, and that's so true in life. And by having this banquet and doing what you're doing today, you are serving so many people. That's why I give the United Way, because I think it's the best way to give my money to serve the most people. Trish mentioned my bell story, and I'd like to share that with you. You know, we as women try to balance too much. I mean, men have it easy. They don't have to do all the stuff we do, and we're trying to balance and we're trying to do, and I'm always saying, I can't get it all done. How can I do it? Well, how many of you, if I said, do you know what your priorities are, could raise your hand? Come on. I know what my priorities are. You do too. You're here. You're making a difference. I would tell you my priorities are God, family, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee, golf, tennis, all those things. And I get them out of whack sometime. So one day I was sitting there trying to figure out how could I help myself do a better job of time management. Okay, how many of you like to make lists? More important, how many of you like to check things off your list? Okay, integrity question. How many of you have gone back and put something on your list after you've done it just to check it off? It's there. It's there. That's me. I've got an iPad, I've got an iPhone, I'll buy the new one that's coming out tomorrow. I love gadgets and I love all of that, but I love to make lists. So I came up with the Bells plan where I write the letters every day, B-E-L-L-S. And my goal is to make the bells ring every day. Well, for Joan Cronan to make the bells ring, one, to check off the B, I'm going to read my Bible or do a devotional every day. To check off the E, I'm going to exercise or do something physically that's good for me. To check off one of the L's, I'm going to write a letter. It's usually just a note to somebody I'm thinking about. Emails don't count. It has to be a handwritten note. Sorry, but isn't it fun to get a handwritten note every once in a while these days? The second L is I'm going to learn something new every day. I think it's so important that we keep learning. I am a huge Words with Friends fan, so if at the end of the day I haven't learned something new, I've got Reader's Digest sitting right there. I'm going to learn a new word so I can maybe win. Now the S is the one that I think sounds really important. It's a special project. I don't know about you gals, but I do a better job of keeping life straight at the office than I do keeping my house straight. I hate housework. For almost 70 years, I've tried to find a vacuum cleaner that fits in my hand. There's none that fit. I just hate it. My son-in-law just went as director of sales of Electrolux. I said, don't send me one of those things. I don't want it. But I'm going to do a special project at home, which might be cleaning out my sock drawer, cleaning out the vegetable drawer, just something small. And if you think about it, it's kind of like that elephant. If you do one little bite at a time, it does work. So my challenge to you is to set your goals high, continue to give, continue to serve rather than receive, and I'd like to see if you can make the bells ring. In closing, I'm going to read a poem, and it's one that has meant a lot to me when you think about what's important in life. It's called Money Will Buy. Money will buy a bed, but not sleep, books, but not brains, food, but not appetite, finery, but not beauty, a house, but not a home, medicine, but not health, luxuries, but not culture, fun, but not happiness, religion, but not faith. Never get too busy making a living that you forget to make a life. Your women's leadership group has made a lot of difference in a lot of women's lives. Thank you.